Well, this is a dark story from both sides. That's why I decided to open with somewhere here my two sides to every story. It's in the book. I don't have the book in front of me, but these are all done in ink, like micron pen ink drawings. Here's the book. The main thing for me was, not the main thing, but one very important impact for me was to follow this idea, two sides to every story. I didn't want this to just be a story about how we were abused by the Sioux Indians. I wanted people to know, and here's a good example. That is Inkpaduta's, I think, cousin, they thought it was, Cinnamon-Dota, who was murdered, stuffed under the ice by Henry Lott. And that all happened maybe 3 years before the massacre in north central, northwest Iowa. That's how they treated Indians back then. And his family, his mother, his grandmother, his kids, his wife, they were drowned as well under the ice. But then we jumped to New York. I'm not going to talk through the whole thing, but then we jumped to New York, where the Abby Gardner's family grew up. And these are fairly accurate portraits from my research, and decided they wanted to move to the Midwest. I want to get into the story a little bit of Native American culture. So I have the family talking on this spread about one night on camping on their way west, on their way into Iowa, about Native American culture and how it compares to where they came from in New York. For example, the Iroquois in New York and the Sioux Indians in Iowa and South Dakota and Minnesota. But they're talking here. Okay, speaking of a sad story, here's a very dark page, this is Abby, but they don't shoot her. This is the family, terrified, stuff like that. I mean, it's really, it's a really dark, interesting way to tell the story for me, because like I said earlier, I really enjoy doing composition. I want to tell a story. I want information to let me, say, interpret it the way I want to interpret it. And that means every panel isn't, I want to be kind of addicted to the composition of every panel. There are no pictures of Inkpaduta, the Sioux leader. But he was known, not always as a dark character, but after this story, he was, and he had chicken pox or smallpox after Regency. He had all this white man's disease bumps all over his face, and I'm sorry, I don't remember if it was chicken pox or smallpox, but he survived whatever it was. Again, some dark stuff, the other culture. Here's kind of a ghost rising up out of the lake. Now, there's none of that in the story. That's my own little sidebar. This is a very dark spread here. There's the hole where the ghost was. There's a severed head. Now, that is a true part of the story. And that's the dark side for the white people. But then we're following Inkpaduta and his people to Minnesota. And he's out on the lake imagining what's going to happen, since they've done what they've done. And this is all based on fact, too, all the facts I could find. There he is speaking to a ghostly spirit on the winter lake. See, that's not in any of the books I saw, but I want to put that kind of stuff in the story visually. And then I'm going to close it out with This is a quote. A sad meeting, for inevitably the dead rose up before us. We had parted in the midst of a circle of loved ones. That's a quote from Abby Gardner. So I want to tell the story in two circles. That's her sister. When she found her sister who had survived the massacre, or her sister was not there. Her sister was living in Minnesota nearby then, and she was always worried through the whole story, Abby was, that something had also happened to her sister at another time. But it didn't. They got back together actually near here, up near Shell Rock. And then, of course, the other side is Sitting Bull, who Inkpaduta was with. Believe it or not, Inkpaduta was at the Little Bighorn at Custer's last stand. He and Sitting Bull were a little too old to be on the battlefield, so they were at camp together and they knew each other. And they both went to Canada to avoid prosecution. Sitting Bull came back, nobody ever heard what happened to Inkpaduta after that. Because this story is his and Abby Gardner's both. Two sides to every story, like I said. And then here he is at the end. He's sort of fading. He's a ghost here. There's Abby as an older woman, an adult. And here's a wonderful quote I found in one of her books by Adelaide George Bennett in 1895. And it says, "The lake, still rippling to the gentle breeze, mirrors the grasses and waving trees, while in the shadows Indian legends say, hover the spirits who have passed away. Minnewakan, spirit water, still their spirits hover near. Okoboji, place of resting, may their rest be peaceful here." And I've never heard of this lady, Adelaide Georgia Bennett, in 1895, but I loved the way she put that story down in words. And that's my last page, I think. And here's my first page. This is the cover art. I was going to call it the Spirit Lake Massacre, of course. It's been called that a number of times. And then I thought, no, I don't want to call it that. And doing all my homework, which I've done with most all my projects over the years, I realized that the moon of the snowblind is the month of March for the Sioux Indians, the Dakota Sioux Indians. That's the moon, the month of the snowblind. And I just thought that was a little bit more of a edgy kind of wording than the Spirit Lake Massacre. And that would also help us say there are two sides to this story.